I know most of you, I know most of you know Mike well because most of you work with him for the most part. So I'm happy to be here with you today as well. Most of my work here is behind the scenes. So I know I don't get to see all of you as often unless you come in the office and I'm here. So I'm happy to be here today, and we're glad to be here and going over this important information with you. Really, the purpose of this is for our clients, for their aging parents, and or for their adult children and heirs, just to kind of talk about the types of things that we see often in the office after there's a crisis that's happened or a sickness or death or something. And a lot of this information is things that our clients had wished they had known before a lot of the crisis or the sickness or death or whatever it was that happened. And so we put together this presentation just to help be proactive and be able to get you guys this information ahead of time, just things to think about and a list of things to talk about. Although possibly uncomfortable at times, just important things to talk about prior to anything happening. We will have a Q&A portion at the end. So this is really short. It's just about 20 minutes. And then we'll have some time at the end if you have questions. So if you don't mind holding your questions until the end, that would be great because we might get to it at some point in the presentation. And then the last thing before I turn it over to Mike is that we will be addressing, at times in the presentation, we address things that are more towards parents, at times more towards children. So we kind of jump around and go back and forth because it is really intended for the whole family. So if you hear us jumping around, that's why. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Okay, thanks. Again, thanks everyone for joining us. And a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about actually stems from personal experiences that Krista and I had. In particular, about a year ago, we had a neighbor who was aging and his health started to deteriorate. And as it did, because he didn't have any relatives nearby, his closest relative was his stepdaughter who lived up in Oregon and wasn't able to come down. Krista and I really became the point of contact for communication, and then also assisting him as his health continued to decline. And then even after he had passed away, we were involved with a lot of different pieces to help his stepdaughter out, and we will touch upon those a little bit throughout here. So this is coming from a lot of that's coming from that experience where we just wanted to share. So Kristen, if you want, can you get the slides up and we can get going?
Oops, sorry about that. There we go.
Okay, and as Kristen said, this is an uncomfortable conversation for both parents and children. No one really likes to talk about this. We like to avoid it and think it won't happen, or when it does, we can just deal with it at that time, which rarely works out. So, I like to tell people, like everything else, it works a lot better if you have a plan, because especially with this, sometimes the aging or the illness happens, deteriorates kind of quickly, or it's a long process and you have time. But either way, having a plan helps you to know what to do when the time comes and deal with just the emotions and the issues going on at hand, and not trying to worry about what do we do, where is stuff, how do we handle this, what do mom and dad want, and just eliminating a lot of that stress.
And one of the things we're really trying to avoid mostly is family misunderstandings, especially among the siblings or heirs. It's something that we've seen too often in our office, where a parent passes away and then the siblings come and there's arguing. We didn't know, they never told me that. Why did you know that? And we didn't know that. And that's really, it's painful for us to watch, but also we know that the parents wouldn't want that as well. So having these kinds of conversations and plans ahead of time can be helpful. So we're going to go into some of the specific things that are important to address ahead of time.
Okay, so on the left side of this slide, the main point really is to have a list of what your parents have and where it's kept. So, knowing the location, like, are things in files? Are they on the computer? Are they at the bank? Is there a safe deposit box in the house or at the bank? Do you have access to it, whether it's, key to the home or the code to the house alarm, passwords, keys to files and safes? You want to know where things are and how to get to them and not be searching all around. Third point payments for, basic things, utilities. A lot of us, especially the younger generation, they do everything online. And a lot of our parents do things online too. So that's important to know. Are they paying bills online or, the old-fashioned way with a check? Because you will want to know how to access those statements, how to pay them in a timely manner, how to get communication from companies so you don't miss a payment. Some documents to have in place or to know where, if your parents have it. Insurance policies. I have this first just because if there is a life insurance policy in place, this may be one of the things you want, or one of the point of contacts you want to contact first are the insurance carriers, because once you get that process, the life insurance proceeds will be available, and there are situations where you may need those funds to pay off debt or to manage the estate until a house is sold or some other situation. So you want to know, do they have a life insurance policy or multiple policies? And if so, where are those held with which carriers? Passwords we talked about, bank accounts, know where the money is, a trust and a will, know if they have a trust and a will, and if they don't, then that's a separate conversation, which I would highly recommend we have or you discuss together. Again, utilities and bills, where are they? How are they paid? One thing that we don't have listed here, but I did want to say that comes in handy is, especially going back to like the trust and the will, which also covers like health directives. It can be very useful to have that information available electronically. So think about a situation where someone is rushed to the hospital for an emergency or whatever. They are unconscious or incapable to make their own decisions, but maybe the child is listed as the authorized person to make health decisions. Well, the doctors aren't going to let you do that unless you can prove you're the person. And the last thing you want to do is to be in a situation where it's at your parents' house, it's at your house, which is far away, and now you're driving or you're trying to get a hold of these copies, and at the same time, your parents need attention. So if there's a way to have it available electronically, that can make it quicker, either for your parents to access or maybe for you to access. Kind of separately, our clients, through the reporting system we have, there is a feature called the Vault, where documents like this can be stored. So if that is of any interest, with our clients, that's a conversation we can have, and I can talk about that.
Okay, and then on the right side, important contacts. Do you have relationships with these important contacts? So do you know the insurance broker? Do you know who the person is? Do you have a relationship with them? Or if you don't, do you know who it is? Are you able to, do you have their contact information? A state attorney as well. If there's a financial advisor other than Mike, then knowing, sometimes people might have multiple financial advisors, so knowing who those are. In the case of our neighbor, she a year and a half later found out there was an advisor and an account that our neighbor had that she didn't even know about. So it's important to make sure you know who all of those are. There's CPA, that's somebody that you'll want to know who the contact is. And again, if you can have relationships with these people ahead of time, that is, especially like the advisor and the state attorney, those would be really important to have ahead of time, just so that there's already a rapport there. And then lastly, doctors, medical professionals, pharmacies. This is especially helpful if you have a parent that is aging considerably and the health is really questionable, then it could be helpful. And especially if it's if you just have one parent and it's a widow situation where it would be helpful to attend the appointment with them, or even be on a conference call when they're at an appointment, so you can ask questions and understand. And again, a lot of this page we directed towards adult children, but for those of you, our clients that are here, this is important on the flip side to make sure that your adult children have this information and know this, and have a list of this information for them and that you review this with them. Okay, next slide is just some health considerations. So as Mike mentioned, you have electronic or hard copy access of their health directive. This is something that seems pretty obvious, but maybe not all of us have. So it's important to make sure you have a copy of that. Also, especially for those that have aging parents, do you know what medications they're currently taking? Do you know what pharmacy they're using to fill their medications, and do you know where they keep them? In the case of our neighbor, again, that was a different scenario because she was far away and had health problems and couldn't come travel to see him. But at one point I was in his house trying to find all of his medication for her. She's like, can you check the bathroom? Can you check the kitchen? I mean, he had stuff all over and she didn't know what he was taking and what he was supposed to take, because then there was just stuff all over. So that would be something important when your parents get to that point where they're on a lot of medication and aging considerably. And then lastly, looking into home health care or assisted living ahead of time so that you're not in a situation at the end where you're rushed to make a decision. And sometimes there's even wait lists for those things. Or in home health care, looking at those options ahead of time to find out financially, is that a viable option so that they can still stay in their home? Or even if they need to come live with you, do you have, is that something that you've talked about and addressed and figured out? So again, most of this stuff, if you can at least have somewhat of a plan ahead of time in your mind, so that it's not, so it's less stressful in the moment when you're already grieving other things, to have a lot of this kind of laid out is really, can be helpful.
Okay, let's just touch upon some of the, financial issues. Successor trustee, very often it's common to have the children, one or a couple as the successor trustee. Great if that's the case, but if not, sometimes there's someone else named for various reasons. And if that's the case, you want to make sure that if there are children, that they still have the contact information of whoever the successor trustee is. And the reason is, very often the children will be one of the first to know that something's going on or something has happened to their parents, and they will be in charge of notifying the appropriate people, such as the successor trustee and then the other people that Kristen listed before. Investment accounts, I think we already covered that. Just know where things are, where they have it, which institutions and things like that. A couple tax implications that I just wanted to touch upon. Like some assets have a step up in cost basis. And what that means is that when you buy something, you pay a certain price, but upon the death of a person, the value of that gets stepped up to the current value, which means that gain is not taxable. Okay, so that's what you need to know, is which assets get a step up to mitigate the potential tax implications. And where this comes in handy, and this is good to know beforehand, because you don't want to be trying to figure out which assets do and which don't. But we had a situation with a client who was looking at potentially moving his mom into long-term care or in nursing care. And her house, she has been in forever and ever. And as you can imagine, in California, there's a huge, huge capital gain. Well, they were talking about where would they get the money to fund for the nursing care. And, by the natural default is, well, sell the house. Well, if they do that, then they are exposed to that large capital gain. So that's a conversation. I'm not saying that's not the right answer, but it's a conversation to have to know what your options are. And if there are other things and other ways to maybe fund to avoid selling the house, so that you don't lose that potential step up. So just things to think about and things to talk about with me or whoever your advisor is. Related to the house too, part of that cost basis, as you do capital improvements throughout the years, whether it's a kitchen remodel or whatever else you've done, those are eligible to be added to the cost basis, which makes it higher, which makes your taxes less. You want to keep track of those as you do it, because over 20 years of living in a place or 30 years, trying to go back to remember what you did, how much it cost, where are the receipts to prove it, is you're going to miss something. And again, it's not the time to do it. So you want to be keeping track of that as you do it, to have a file so that you have that all set and handy for your accountant. Okay, here, what I wanted to touch upon too, when dealing with like trusts and things like that, often parents will say, well, let's just split it evenly, everything evenly amongst our kids, which can work out really well. Some things you may want to consider though is sometimes, people want different things. So, for example, we have a client that has multiple rental properties, one for each kid. And his desire is that when he passes away, each child will take on the rental properties. Well, in talking with the kids, there's only one kid that really cares about that. And there's one property that he really wants and the others he doesn't care about. So, those are things where you have a disconnect between what the parent wants and what the kids actually want and desire. And having those conversations can be good. The other situation is sometimes there are things in the family that one sibling really wants for whatever reason, sentimental or, practical use or whatever. And having those conversations to talk about it beforehand can be helpful to, again, avoid disagreements or fighting when you're trying to deal with the emotional loss and figuring out how to split things up. So these are all things that if you can have those conversations first, it can really make things a lot smoother and to have a greater understanding of everyone's wishes and desires.
And just kind of as a side note here, this bottom note from the perspective of the adult children, even if you're not able to uphold some of these wishes after your parents pass away, it's still important, respectful, and helpful for all of the siblings and heirs to hear these preferences from their parents, while also acknowledging that you'll do the best you can considering the circumstances during that time. So there's flexibility, but also just let's hear it out and hear what their wishes are in those unique situations.
Okay, the summary of this slide is make sure you have everything updated. Far too often, people will do something, make a trust, list a beneficiary, and then just forget about it. But things change. Tax laws change, estate planning changes, family dynamics or structure changes, with divorces or kids getting married, grandkids, separations, deaths in the family. So what I would advise is, every, few years, maybe 5 to 10 years, look at the estate plans you have, look at your beneficiaries to make sure, are these the people I want to get the money, and is it set up properly so that the money will be filtered to those people instead of somehow getting redirected somewhere else that you no longer intend to, have those people get.
Okay, our last slide, just
Okay.
overlooked considerations. Michael, take the left side.
Yeah, again, here, is there a trusted go-to person that can act in between, such as a neighbor or a friend, until you as a child can get there? Or is there someone you can call, or vice versa, that they can call you to give you an updates about what's going on? And if so, well, there should be, but make sure that each party, the trusted contact in yourself as a child, have each other's phone numbers, the emails, but definitely phone numbers, in a way to contact each other so that everything's getting taken care of in a timely manner.
Okay, and then lastly on the right, if your parents aren't savvy with technology, which this day and age, for the most part, even our some of our older clients are pretty savvy with technology, so it's not as much of an issue, but it can be. So depending on the age of your parents. So a couple things to just consider: if they have trouble operating their mobile phone and don't know exactly how to use it, then potentially consider keeping a landline as a backup. In the case of our neighbor, his stepdaughter really had wished she had done that, because sometimes she just couldn't even get a hold of him because he couldn't figure out how to answer his cell phone sometimes. And then also if they're willing, the aging parent, help them set up online access to their various accounts. So when the time comes and they're not capable of doing it anymore, you can pay them remotely. This is especially important if your parent lives in a different state. Again, in the case of our neighbor, we at the end there were mailing all of his bills up to her in a big package. And then she went on and she set up the online accounts herself and was able to do it that way. But it was just a lot of extra work that I know she had wished ahead of time that she had worked that out with him, because he was still paying everything by check. And I realize not everyone does that, and that's not super common, but something to think about for those rare situations that happens. Okay, so with that, I know there's probably other things we could have touched on, or maybe things that we didn't get to. So we're going to open it up for Q&A if there's any questions, or if you have a specific or private scenario you want to discuss with Mike. I mean, all of you should have his info, but it's on the screen as well, because I think we do have a few guests here. So it's there as well. But are there any questions? If so, just go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to ask. Okay, last call.
Oh, it's Chris Hunt.
Hi, Chris.
Just a suggestion. In addition to the passwords that I have tried to think of and write down for my children, I also made a list, as much as I could remember, of the security questions and my answers to the security questions in case they needed to go that extra step.
That's a great point. Yeah, great point. Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
We should have had you help us give this presentation.
Well, maybe we should do a fourth one and we can have her as a guest host.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, if there are any questions that come up that you think of after the fact, then don't hesitate to reach out. And like I said, we recorded this presentation, so we're gonna have it available. We'll probably just be sending it out as a link to all of you. That way, if you have a parent that wasn't able to attend, or a child that wasn't able to attend that you want to send it to, they'll have access to it as well. But thank you, everybody, for your time. We hope this was helpful.
Yeah, thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great evening, and just let us know if you have questions.
Thank you.